Hi, thanks for joining me. All right, we're going to make a video about proportional percents. So let's start with how to find a percent. And we're going to do the decimal way and the fraction way. And then we're going to teach the proportional way. The proportional way is what we have to use if we have the two other numbers, but we don't have the percent. So here's what you're going to learn. This is the middle to the end of sixth grade. Let's see. So let's say, what is 12% of 46? And the first thing we can do is estimate. Okay, let's just start there. The 10% rule is you move the decimal point over. So if 10% of 46 is 4.6, then the answer we're looking for 12% would be that plus a fifth of that. But let's just pretend I can't do that. So we're looking for like something a little bit more. So maybe 5, between 5 and 5.3. Let's see how well I did estimating. Okay, so let's do the decimal method. First of all, the word of means times. So when we find a fraction of something or a percent of something, we're multiplying. So change the percent to a decimal. How do we change 12% to a decimal? We're going to take this invisible decimal point. It's there, but we couldn't see it. A whole number is always followed by an invisible decimal point, and then we move it over twice to the left. So we have 0.12. So we end up with, let's put these to the side. We end up with 46 times 0.12. Okay, so do you remember how to do your long multiplication? 6 times 2 is 12. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9. Put in my 0 for step 2. Then I have 1 times 6 and 1 times 4. Add them together. And now I have to put the decimal in. So I ask myself, how many decimal digits do we have in the problem? 2. And so let's situate it in the answer so that I have 2 decimal digits in the answer. So our answer is 5.52. So I estimated poorly, right? I was too low, but it's fun to try anyway. But at least it's not like if your answer is like 78, it's like way wrong, then you know you did something wrong, right? That's why I started with an estimate. I know that it just needs to be a little bit more than the 10% number, so it's gonna be like 5 something. But if it was 9 something or 13 something, or if it was down like a 1 or a 2, then I know I did something wrong. So it's just a way to double check. So now we're going to do the same thing, 12% of 46, and we're going to do the fraction method. How do I make 12% into a fraction? Percent means per 100. So 12 out of 100. What does that look like as a fraction? 12 out of 100, 12 hundredths times 46. How do I make 46 a fraction? By the way, if you don't know any of these steps, like any of these smaller skills that we're stringing together to do the big skill, just reach out to me for a lesson and we'll learn all the smaller skills that you need. Okay, 46 over 1 is how you turn a whole number into a fraction. So I can go ahead and do this fraction multiplication problem, but it's going to be a lot easier if I can reduce. I have some options here for reducing. I could just reduce this first fraction. So when I did 12%, 12 over 100, this is correct. However, let's go ahead and reduce it. Why work with big numbers if I don't have to, right? So 12 over 100, let's divide those both by 4. And what do we get? Now remember, as long as I do the same thing, multiplying or dividing, to the top and the bottom of a fraction, then it's an equivalent fraction. So I'm going to divide by 4 and get 3 and 25. So now I have to do 3 times 46. That's kind of a pain to do with long multiplication. I am kind of curious. I'm going to do this another way. Okay, I'm curious what this would look like if instead, let's see, let's just do 6/50ths. That way I can do some cross canceling. I'm looking to make these a lot smaller so I don't have to work with the 46. But see, math, you have a lot of options. We can do the diagonal, which would give us a 23 and a 25. I mean, 3 times 46 is the same thing as 6 times 23. So that didn't really help me out. I'm just going to erase that. I was curious to see if it would look any different. Sometimes if you use a different option, your problem ends up looking different enough to where you could do mental math, right? We're looking for the easiest way to do things. So if we find a way where it's easy to do mental math and we don't have to write things out, that would be preferable. Then again, let me show you how to do this with mental math. Okay, 46 times 3 with mental math. This is just a side note. We're taking a rabbit trail. 46 is a 40 and a 6, right? 40 plus 6 is 46. So if I can do 40 times 3 and 6 times 3 and then add them together, I can do this in my head. 40 times 3 is 120. 6 times 3 is 18. Put them together and I get 138. And my answers match. So where am I now? I lost track. 138 is the numerator here. And then we have a 25 on the bottom. Let's erase the extra stuff. How do we change 138 25ths into a mixed number? How many times does 25 go into 138? 25 times 5 is 125. And then 13 more would bring us up to 138. So there we have 5 and 13 25ths. So the question to ask is, are these the same answer? Is 5.52 the same thing as 5 and 13 25ths? They're both just barely over a half, correct? 12 and a half over 25 would be a half. And 5.52 is just barely over 5.5. So do you see how they're the same? I can tell because they're both just barely over 5.5. And then if I wanted to verify that, I could put 13 divided by 25 in my calculator and it will tell me 0.52. Or I could do 13 divided by 25 long division. That's another skill that you should be pretty good at by this stage. By the middle of 6th grade, you should know how to do that. Now we're going to talk about x by proportion. To 12, we're going to do this a third time. Now, what is a proportion? Let's talk about that. Very similar to a ratio. So let's say we have an equivalent fraction, 3/7 equals 9 what? Do you know how to solve an equivalent fraction? You should have learned this at the end of 4th grade, the beginning of 5th grade, so hopefully you're very good at this by now. I figure out what did I multiply by on the top, and whatever that is, do it to the bottom. Remember the rule? You can multiply or divide by whatever you want as long as it is the same on the top and the bottom, and then you'll have an equivalent fraction. But this is also called a ratio or a proportion. The words ratio and proportion just tell me I have a consistent relationship going on. And this relationship is going to be consistent whether I'm going vertically, which is hard to figure out because that's going to be like a decimal, or if I'm going horizontally, which is the easy, obvious one, right? You can see I have a consistent relationship because they're both times 3. But it's actually consistent vertically as well. Now, it's going to be some decimal, but they are multiplied by the same thing to make the top number into the bottom number. So that is called a proportion. It's just a consistent relationship, very similar to just your equivalent fraction. Okay, so a percent means 12 out of 100 is the same relationship as something out of 46. What is that something? That's what we're trying to figure out. Now, this is a little bit tricky. It's harder than your typical equivalent fraction because 12 does not go into 100. I can't, like, 12 times something is 100. Nope, that's not going to work. Now, it will be like a decimal or something, and I can figure that out with my calculator, but I'm going to teach you a different method today. Maybe we'll do both. But and horizontally, that's not easy either. 100 divided by something equals 46. That's gonna be a decimal. It's not obvious, right? I cannot do that with mental math, but I can't do it with mental math anyway. Anyway, we do this, we're gonna need our calculator. So I could figure out what it is going vertically or horizontally. But the other trick we do is we go multiply on the diagonal and then divide by the other number. So this is easier to plug into your calculator than those other two options. We're just going to go 12 times 46 divided by 100 equals 5.52. Well, that sounds familiar. Do you remember that was the answer? 5.52? So we got the right answer. Now that we have our 5.52, let's go back and prove the other parts. So 100 divided by 12 should be the same relationship as 46 divided by 5.52. 100, follow along with me on your calculator. 100 divided by 12. From bottom to top, I'm dividing by 8, well, 8.3, we're at 3, so it's 8 and a third. So that would be, yeah, divided by 8 and a third. So then we're going to go 46 divided by 5.52 is also divided by 8 and a third. So it's proportional. It's a ratio. They have a consistent relationship. And going across, what about this? 100 divided by something is 46, or 46 times something is 100. And using fact families, I know I'm allowed to switch those around. So 100 divided by 46 is a long repeating decimal. See, this is why this way wouldn't work for us, because I wouldn't be able to enter this decimal in if I didn't already have my 5.52, I wouldn't be able to enter this decimal in. Well, except for actually, I could just use it. It was already on my screen, right? I'll show you how we could do it. If we didn't already have our 5.52, we would go 100 divided by 46, and then I get this long repeating decimal on my screen. Go ahead and try it out. And now we're going to use that same number and multiply it. No, because I don't have my 5.52 yet. I guess I would have to save the number. That's an advanced calculator skill, is to put it in my memory. So memory plus, will that work? And then 12 divided by my memory recall equals 5.52. There you go. Okay, I haven't taught that calculator skill to my students yet, but that's how you would do it. But anyways, you don't have to even know that. What I'm trying to say is that you have options, and math is all about patterns that work multiple ways. So all you need to know for this skill, because it is a lot easier, is multiply the diagonals and then divide by 100. So let's do another one like that. What is 18% of 71? This is going to be a nice decimal. So let's go 18% is something over 71. Oh, I forgot to say this part earlier. Our formula is the percent over 100 equals the is number over the of number. Now, I don't know what the is number is. I'm looking for something is 18% of 71, but I don't know what. So that's why I put an N there. I have a variable, which is the same thing as just putting a question mark, meaning I don't know that one. That's what I'm looking for. Or if we were in third grade, I would just give you a box, right? That's cuter, so I like doing that one. So of 71, 71 is the of number. It goes on the bottom of this fraction. All right, and then how do I solve this? 18 times 71 divided by 100 is 12.78. And if you wanted to double check that using the decimal version or the fraction version, so a fraction, 18 over 100, but this time you're going to do multiplied by 71. So you have a lot of different choices. And what's really interesting with math is how do these choices relate to each other, right? How is this, I'm sorry, how is this ratio the same thing as saying 18 over 100 times 71, right? That's an interesting question. Okay, so now we go to, let's put our formula back up there. Is over of. Go ahead and write yourself a cheat sheet and commit that to memory as you practice it some more. Today I'm using a Spectrum 6 book and I'm on page 53. So we have, we're going to do a decimal on the right side. 0.9 is what percent of 4.5? So let's plug these numbers in. 0.9 is and of 45 of 4.5. The percent, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out, right? Let's make some more space on the board. So my is number, my of number is equal to something out of 100. And let's just pause there and make sure we understand why this is. The relationship between zero point 0.9 and 4.5, which by the way is the same as 9 and 45. If you want to make this easier, just remove the decimal points because what we're doing is multiplying them both by 10. If you want to move it over on the top and the bottom, then you just have 9 and 45, right? Then we don't have to worry about the decimal points. Okay, the relationship of 9 out of 45 is the same as a relationship of something out of 100. What would you expect it to be? Before we do this, can you estimate? 45 is almost 50, right? This is almost half of 100. So this number might be 18, and we would expect it to be a little bit higher than 18. So is it 19? That would be my guess. So let's find out. So whatever numbers we have on the diagonal, we multiply those, and then we divide by the other number. So that's a 900 divided by 45. And then we have a 20. So I was right. We had to go a little bit bigger than 18. I wasn't sure if it was going to be 19 or 20 or a decimal in between. And actually, I could have done that with just equivalent fractions, huh? Because that one does have a nice clean times 5. See the pattern? It has a nice clean vertical relationship where I didn't have to enter anything in my calculator. I could have done that with mental math, just the normal equivalent fractions that you learned back in fourth grade or fifth grade. Okay, let's do another one. Um, 16 is something percent of 40. So our it goes on top, the of number goes on bottom, and then we're looking for something out of 100. Um, so this one, there's a way to do it with the typical equivalent fractions if you reduce 16/40ths. So let's do this a couple different ways because I like playing with my math. I like to trying it different ways. It's just fun to play around. I'm going to reduce that down to 8/20ths. Now, can you just do it the normal way? 20 times 5 is 100. So 8 times 5 is 40. Well, that's kind of funny seeing this 40 number again. 16 is 40% of 40. Isn't that funny? But it's true, right? It's a little bit, it's less than half of 40. Okay, let's go back and do this the proportional way. To solve a proportion, we do cross multiplication. 16 times 100 is 1600 divided by the third number. You can do this with mental math. Do you remember how to divide with zeros and do mental math? Cancel out if they both have a zero. And then we have 16 divided by 4 equals 4. And that leftover zero gets tacked on. So we end up with a 40. Okay, there we go. Lots of different skills that we covered here. Maybe you realize you need some review on any of these tricks, any of the mental math, any of these other smaller skills we had to use. I'm going to do one more problem because this page has an interesting one, a fraction. Let's do this and show what we would do with a fraction. A fraction of a fraction can be a percent also. Any number out of a number can be a percent, and it doesn't have to be a whole number. It can be a decimal or a fraction. So let me clean this up. Sorry about that. 1/3 is what percent of 5/6? How am I going to do this? Well, let's set it up the same way, but I'm not going to be able to put it in my calculator, so we're going to do it a little bit differently. So 1/3 is uh, something of 5/6. I know that looks really weird because we're not used to seeing a fraction in a fraction. I need to do 1/3 times 100 divided by 5/6. Now, I know this is twisting your brain a little bit, but let's just take it step by step. You do know how to do this. You've done this before. You just can't do it on your calculator, right? So 1/3 times 100. It's 100 thirds. Now we're going to take the 100 thirds and we need to divide by 5/6, right? Which means multiplying by 6/5. Okay, where can we cross cancel? I'm going to give you a minute to think about this. Both of these diagonals can do a cross cancel. Just pause if you want more time. 3 and 6 is a 1 and a 2. Then 5 divided by 5 and 100 divided by 5. So that gives me a nice clean answer of 40. 1/3 is 40% of 5/6. Trying to think of how to double check that. 1/3 would be half of 2/3. 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. So it's a little bit less, and 40% is a little bit less than 50%. Okay, it's okay if you only followed half of that. Sometimes I give extra tricks and extra examples using different methods just to be clever, just to play with it. But if one method works for you, you only need to know one method. So don't worry if you understand all the methods, right? The only thing is the proportional method is the one you have to use when you don't know the percent. And you're wondering what is the percent? Something is blank percent of another number, then we have to use the proportional method. All right, hope that helped. See you next time.